Hey everybody, it's Party Elite, and today we're taking a look at some of my most anticipated games that will be rounding off what's left of the year. We're over halfway through the year, and what better time than now to make additions and edits to our wishlist. As always, this list takes a look at strategy games in a broad sense. We'll see good old-fashioned 4X games, RTS games, turn-based tactical games, as well as simulation games, city builders, and more. If I missed any that you think are particularly intriguing, let me know in the comments down below. For now, let's dive on into my 11 most anticipated strategy games of Q3 and Q4 in 2019. Age of Wonders Planetfall, releasing on August 6, 2019, is right around the corner and has been on these lists since the start of the year. The Age of Wonders games are stepping away from the typical fantasy setting into a science fiction one, and it's bringing with it a great blend of Civilization-style nation building and XCOM-style tactical battles, blended in with some fairly in-depth RPG mechanics as well. I had the fortune of playing the game during a streaming event earlier this year, and I was very pleased with how smoothly things transitioned from the strategic layer to the tactical layer, and the sheer amount of choice that was available for selecting and customizing factions, customizing units, and even customizing hero characters. The combat mechanics were a joy to see in action as well. The game goes beyond standard melee and ranged armaments to include things like psionic powers, raising the dead, mind control, etc., ensuring that there is a fair amount of variety. On the nation building side of things, each of the 6 factions has very different capabilities and preferences, and with the ability to customize them to varying degrees, the potential for replayability here is mind-boggling. I can highly recommend keeping an eye on this one, and it's certainly one I'll be reviewing on the channel and covering with a Let's Play and perhaps more. Warsaw is set to release on September 4th, 2019, and only came to my attention relatively recently. Set during the Warsaw Uprising of 1944 that sought to end German occupation, this tactical RPG centers itself around some unlikely heroes of this uprising. The game has you building a team from the various civilians of the area, men and women, young and old. Each of these team members brings in their own unique skills and abilities which, ideally, work well together to bring you victory. Upgrading your team members and devising an approach that synergizes their abilities and equipment seems to be the core of the action, with a touch of RNG thrown in to make things interesting, or perhaps exceedingly frustrating. Historical and random events are littered across the historical map of 1944 Warsaw, and as you receive orders from HQ, you'll have to navigate said map, choosing when to engage and when to withdraw to live another day. The non-linear approach promises a ton of replayability, with a lot to explore in character backstories, important decision-making, and random encounters. With some clear Darkest Dungeon vibes and a great hand-painted art style, this is one to keep an eye on if you're itching for that style of gameplay. And I know I certainly am. The Settlers is another game that has been on these lists since the beginning of the year. With a planned release date of fall 2019, the eventual return of the Settlers is drawing ever closer. The Settlers games have always been home to complex systems coming together, mimicking real-world supply chains alongside some of the more traditional aspects of strategy games, like going to war. The cute and cartoon-like visuals have always belied the depth that these games present. Whether you're just trying to bake bread or you're trying to arm your nation, The Settlers proves a challenge that is easy to overcome but difficult to champion. On the topic of which, we've heard that there are going to be new victory mechanics, including the hosting of tournaments that attract tourists to watch battles between champions. Now, these kinds of changes to the formula will certainly be welcome to a series with a great and mostly untarnished history. The Settlers Alliance website consistently provides updates on new aspects of the game, such as the balancing act of builders and workers and the guild houses that provide them, or the intricate workings of the copper mines and tool makers who are in turn needed to recruit new workers and builders. Again, it's an intricate network system of resources and their demands and the workers that produce them. Now, even something as simple as increasing the population of your settlement becomes an intricate dance of providing the right combination of resources and structures in the right amount, and we also see the integration of stamina and the food needed to recharge it. There's a lot to unpack with the Settlers, and I'll definitely be covering it on this channel, so keep an eye out for it as more news and early access hopefully comes around. Planet Zoo will be releasing on the 5th of November 2019, bringing us the joy of managing our own zoos. With a developer's pedigree and a past of games like Planet Coaster and Jurassic World Evolution, I have high hopes for the game, and we've already been introduced to some interesting mechanics and concepts. The conservationist angle that's being taken here is an interesting one for a zoo tycoon game. The game will often put us in the position of rehabilitators and wildlife rescuers, which is a nice way, I think, of delivering missions and challenges. Now, apart from that, we've been told that the park building systems and the animal AI are both extremely complex and nicely tied together. Now, this allows us to create custom play spaces and experiences for our animals, and then see how they behave and interact depending on various factors, needs, and wants. One particular example we've been given is that of the chimpanzee and their constant demand for exciting play spaces. It means that you need to design something that keeps them interested and keeps them happy so that they in turn are interesting to watch and don't bring your park ratings down. Interactions like that between animals and the environment sounds very interesting, and animals also interact with each other, often able to cohabitate, coexist, or sometimes needing to be kept far apart so that one doesn't adversely affect the other. Managing animal happiness and well-being seems to be very deeply explored for this title, and I'm excited to see it all come together alongside those standard park builder stuff like themes, high degrees of customization, overpriced merchandise, and not having enough janitors. There's never enough janitors. Transport Fever 2 will be releasing sometime in Q4 of 2019, and with near monthly updates since the announcement in April of this year, we've learned a bit about the upcoming game, with a lot more to come. The initial conversations have centered around the tremendous level of customization that is being offered in a variety of aspects. For one, players are able to terraform and otherwise set up their sandbox as they desire using a random map generator as well as manual terraforming tools. This allows you to paint the terrain both in terms of height and in terms of textures, and allows you to build rivers and lakes and oceans, or if you hate everything you've done, you can reset everything to the randomly generated base. This only scratches the surface of customization though. There's also a great blueprint system that can be used to customize train platforms, and the new traffic light system and road management systems are providing much more of a focus on bus and private vehicle transport methods alongside the trains and planes. Apart from sandbox modes, the game also boasts 3 campaigns that are set during different time periods and on 3 different continents, providing a variety of visuals, settings, and even challenges, while the free-to-play sandbox mode provides achievements and objectives to give some sense of direction to the free play for those that want it. The game looks absolutely gorgeous, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. I love a good challenge, and anybody who watches my Workers and Resources Soviet Republic Let's Play knows how good I am at managing trains, so this is looking right up my alley. Crossroads Inn is set to release sometime in 2019 and is looking like a quirky tavern tycoon game with a strangely epic backstory of potential regicide and succession to the throne of a great nation at stake. The single-player campaign takes you from being a mere innkeeper to sitting on the throne, with some scenario modes there to provide specific challenges, and a sandbox mode that focuses on the joys and pitfalls of running a fantasy tavern. While that might sound rather small in scope, there's actually a surprising amount of stuff to do. You'll of course be furnishing and decorating your tavern, customizing all aspects including the very floors and walls, but then there's staff management, which plays a key role as well, naturally. You're making sure that people are happy, you're solving their troubles, and potentially gaining special characters like bards and courtesans. Then there's the whole aspect of managing ingredients, debts, and even trade routes. There seems to be a pretty interesting level of detail in the world map and in how ingredients and resources are obtained, having you set up appropriate trade routes and caravans alongside their armed escorts. All of this comes at a cost, of course, meaning there's a layer of management that goes outside of the metaphorical 4 walls of your inn. Promising a sense of humor, a fun storyline, and a sandbox mode with replayability, the setting alone piques my interest, and I look forward to running my own tavern when this game eventually releases this year.
As the king's mistress, she had an established position in the royal court, but now will align herself with anyone who will help her retain her status. The army's commander, Judine Montre, is a disciplined leader with unparalleled focus. For years, she would use every occasion to try to rekindle the conflict with Untermarch. And now she's been given the perfect excuse. The cunning Chancellor Muvald Trovin is the master of the royal treasury. He controls the movement of coin throughout the realm, and will use every opportunity to enrich himself, because to him, gold is power. Meanwhile, in a village at the edge of the kingdom, where the trade routes cross, a young man prepares to take on the mantle of a local barkeep. Knowing nothing of his lineage, he cannot foresee the importance of his small tavern at the Crossroads.
Iron Harvest is still set for its 2019 release date, and as a backer of the game since its Kickstarter days, I have to say I'm still excited to see it launch. Set in the alternate history world of 1920s plus Eastern Europe, we see man and machine fight side by side in a Company of Heroes style RTS with minimal base building and a focus on tactics and strategy over how many times you can click per second. The art style is fantastic and is inspired by the works of Jakub Rosalski, the same concept artist whose name I am constantly butchering and whose work inspired the board game Scythe. Again, I apologize for the butchering of names. Now, from a gameplay perspective, a lot of things feel familiar. Cover mechanics, destructible environments, equipment pickups, resource points that need to be fought over, etc. That's all pretty familiar, but the addition of these diesel punk mechs into the formula can certainly stir things up. Not only are the designs and animations of these mechs extremely cool and well thought out, but their varying speeds, purposes, and capabilities means that there is the added layer of thinking required when balancing your infantry against what could be considered your armored division. Except this armored division is able to walk through buildings and withstand poorly placed armor-piercing shots and is able to stand guard around resource points with relative impunity unless the enemy moves in cleverly. With proper balancing between mech and infantry types and their respective costs, the game can be a very interesting back and forth between choosing the right units at the right time and using the right tactics to overcome an enemy force. There's going to be a campaign, various challenge maps, and of course, multiplayer skirmishes to play against the AI or against friends as well. Now, I'm hoping to see a lot more of this game in the coming months, and I'll certainly be covering it when it releases on the channel. Fantasy General 2 is set to release sometime in 2019, and it brings with it turn-based tactical combat with over 75 unique unit types, including powerful hero characters and battles that take into consideration terrain, weapons, armor, magic, morale, and more. The developers are supposedly doing away with standard rock, paper, scissors mechanics that artificially enhance one unit over another, and instead are focusing on equipment that performs well against certain behaviors as the core system of combat. An example that was given is that spears do well against any charging unit, not just cavalry. It just so happens that cavalry is naturally prone to charging. A campaign map takes you from engagement to engagement, allowing you to choose which ones to pursue and which ones to leave unattended, while also allowing you to upgrade your units and recruit new ones to use in battle between said engagements. There is promise of replayability depending on decisions that are made on the campaign map, and the developers certainly seem interested in pushing some new or different ideas. Apart from the aforementioned ditching of the rock, paper, scissors mechanic, there's also talk of magic being a resource limited by mana that can only be obtained by controlling certain strategic points on a battlefield. Little things like this can bring enough of a differentiation to help a game stand out in an otherwise crowded space, and between all this and the focus on morale-based tactical gameplay and RPG elements, it's safe to say that I'm intrigued by Fantasy General 2 and will be keeping an eye on it. Crying Suns is set to release sometime in 2019, and it brings with it a tactical roguelite experience where you lead a space fleet exploring a mysterious fallen empire. With serious FTL vibes, the game is going for a more story-driven approach inspired by classics like Dune and Foundation. Despite a story-driven approach, we're still seeing procedurally generated universes that provide replayability and over 300 story events spread out over 6 chapters. The real-time battles have you managing squadrons and weapon systems, keeping an eye on your own ship's overall health and subsystems while trying to eliminate the same on the other side of the battle. Expeditions can be mounted to partake in missions on planets, and while these are largely automated, there is a degree of decision-making as to who should be sent to lead the task force and when you should retreat should the odds turn against you. This game honestly looks like one which draws you into play for several hours at a time, and then you take a long break from, only to come back to with that same zeal months down the line. There's a certain appeal to games that can be picked up, put down, and then picked up again months or even years later that makes them worth checking out. I'm definitely intrigued by the art style and the story as well, and I plan on checking the game out when it finally releases later this year. Desperados is coming back with Desperados 3, releasing sometime in 2019, and this is yet another game that has been on these lists since the start of the year. A real-time tactics game, Desperados 3 is set in the Wild West, following a band of up to 5 characters, each with unique capabilities and attributes that are meant to be used in tandem to solve the various problems that might arise during any given mission. The developers have previously worked on Shadow Tactics Blades of the Shogun, a similar game with a slightly different setting, and they did well enough to inspire confidence in this upcoming sequel to Desperados. With a heavy focus on stealth and multiple ways to solve any given problem, the game relies on timing, tactics, and situational awareness, a great combination for a real-time tactics game, and what little gameplay we've seen suggests it's been pulled off quite well. There was a closed beta in July, and though there were some initial rumblings of a summer release, I think it's pretty clear that we're looking at a fall or winter release instead. At least we know production continues, and if the game was in beta at the start of July, it can't be that far out now. These games have always had compelling stories to tell, and I intend to cover this one on the channel as soon as possible. Counter-Terrorist Agency is releasing in Q4 of 2019 and only recently came to my attention as a pretty intriguing simulation/management game that puts you in charge of a global counter-terrorist unit. The game puts you in charge of everything from Big Brother-style surveillance systems where you listen in on conversations that you can either mark as suspicious or choose to ignore, as well as the actual apprehension of suspects followed by their interrogation or release. You'll be obtaining resources from various nations and executing missions across international boundaries, from drone strikes to arrests to infiltration. Making the wrong call will cost you, so often you'll want to wait for more intel, but waiting can result in an attack finding its way through your grasp. Sometimes you'll have to make on-the-fly moral decisions, like shooting down a plane full of passengers or letting it crash into a local football field. And while all this is going on, you'll be spending accumulated points to improve your agency's capabilities in the hopes of dismantling entire terror networks. The game is still in active development, with Kickstarter updates going out as recently as July 1st of this year, and I'm excited to follow its progress. And as somebody who has always been interested in games about espionage, infiltration, and sometimes questionable cross-border activities, I'm really excited to check this one out.
Drone mission success. Terrorist incident reported.
It's always hard to pick out games for these lists. I try to cover the big names as well as those that might have slipped under people's radars. If there are any that you feel have slipped under mine, feel free to let me know in the comments down below and I'll check them out. There's a lot more coming out this year, from Warcraft Reforged to the recently released Oxygen Not Included, and some other titles that are having release dates reshuffled to later and later as those dates get closer and closer. 2019 so far has been an excellent year for strategy games of all kinds, and it's not over yet. If you'd like more strategy gaming content, including news, reviews, previews, let's plays, and more, make sure you subscribe to this channel. As always, a big thanks goes out to all of my channel members and patrons for supporting the channel on a monthly basis, and a big thanks goes out to you for watching. Until next time, cheers.